A handful of days passed since we moved to the Nagaoka mansion in Nagarayama. All of the men stationed here were purposely participating in a training exercise today. I was unable to learn what exactly the exercise entailed, but from what I could gather, it was a drill to practice using some of the new Western artillery and battle techniques as adopted by our enemies. Since we had arrived here, however, I noticed that Kondo-san was absent, slumping further and further into a depressive malaise as the days went on. Sano-san too was nowhere to be seen. As I learned, he was becoming more active during the moonlight hours. I was sure that these observations were simply because of the concerted effort to galvanize the troops that defeated the Sacho, but... Would you like some tea, Saito-san? But I already brought him some. I don't want you to keep working so much. I think if you sprinkle in some breaks from time to time, you'll be able to work more efficiently. I quietly placed a cup of tea into his desk. Saito-san glanced at the cup from the corner of his eye, and he spoke in a low tone. Well, earlier I saw him. It seemed like he was reading a book. His answer came curtly, and Saito-san's line of sight dropped to the ground, staring sternly at nothing. Perhaps Kondo-san's declining mood was becoming a distraction for Saito-san as well, proving that Kondo-san's good humor was dearly missed by all of us. Huh?
同志だろうが、体内に入り込んだ患者だろうが、敵だろうが味方だろうが、ひとたび命を受ければ迷うことなく切り殺してきた。かつては新八と命を賭して切り合ったこともある。
What? I gasped audibly as I couldn't help but express astonishment. I'd heard that Saito-san had previously acted behind the scenes performing espionage missions before, but... You had a duel in Nagakura. So it wasn't like a training or sparring match, but rather a fight to the death, right?
その通りだ。少なくとも新八はあの時、俺を殺すつもりで切りかかってきた。そして俺は新八を死なせぬため、新選組を近藤さんや土方さんのものとするため、かの者と立ち会った。新選組こそ本物の武士の拠り所だと思っていたからな。
Stories of the Shinsengumi's illustrious past were not foreign to me, especially when it came to the descriptive quality of Saito-san's observations, but hearing him tell this story now, I picked up that it was not his usual reminiscence. So do you still feel the same way about the Shinsengumi as you did back then? Saito-san had for so long possessed the passionate urge to fight, even going so far as to cross swords with Nagakura. Does this fire still burn as brightly in his heart now as it did all those years ago?
俺は今もあの頃のままだと思っているが、時を経ても変わらぬものなどこの世にはないのかもしれんな。
Saito-san was having an important epiphany. One that, after close consideration, must have come to both Harada and Nagakura as well. That we are all victims of an impermanence that, for a brief and wondrous time, can make us feel something until life inevitably pulls us somewhere different. My brain was out of it for that one, I'm sorry. Maybe we had Maybe what had bothered Saito-san most was to search for within himself for an answer as to whether or not he was strong enough to face that time when it came. So what's your answer, Saito-san?
俺の
And don't answer like you would to either Kondo-san or Hijikata-san. Even as a captain of the Shinsengumi, is there an order that you simply would flat out refuse?
そんなものはない。近藤さんや土方さんの命令がすなわち俺の意志だ。
Are you sure?
当然だ。今までずっとそうしてきたのだからな。
I was a little frustrated by his unwillingness to give me a straight answer, but it was clear there was no point in continuing this conversation, so I stayed quiet. Just then,
斉藤さん、斉藤さん、いらっしゃいますか？
どうした？
ここは敵に囲まれています。今すぐ逃げる支度をしてください。
oh, well, that's perfect.
敵だと？何者だ？
どこの班のものかは分かりませんが、この敷地に入り込もうとした敵兵がいたので狙撃したところ、何事もなかったかのように起き上がったところ。
Shimada's ominous report brought a weary expression out of Saito-san.
説か。
おそらくは。
すぐにここにいる大使を全員集めてくれ。非常事態だ。
はい。
Men were racing frantically throughout the compounds, and after a frenzied moment, all of the men staying in the Nagaoka mansion were gathered in the common room.
これは一体どういうことなんだ？我々はついこの間ここに来たばかりだというのに。いく
らなんでも嗅ぎつけられるのが早すぎる。勘のいいところの騒ぎじゃねえぜ。
It seems as though even Hijikata-san of all people was caught off guard by this predicament. Say, does anyone know where Sanan-san or Heisuke are? I don't see them around here.
それが
もしやまだ新女か。
As Saito-san wondered aloud, Shimada glanced at him timidly before offering up his hesitant answer.
いえ、実はどこを探しても三男さんと東堂君の姿が見当たりませんで、この時間ならまだ寝てらっしゃると思ったんですが、布団はもぬけの殻で。
Shimada's revelation was followed by a nervous pause in the room, and everyone stared at one another. Both Hijikata-san and Saito-san were doubly perplexed. Perhaps they were all thinking the same thing. It was Kondo-san, however, who voiced his concern.
内通者だ。
No, that couldn't be. A cursory glance around the room gave the impression that the sentiment wasn't felt by just myself. However, given the circumstances of our situation, there weren't too many other plausible explanations for why all of this was happening.
これだけ多くの脱退者や離反者を出してしまったのは他の誰でもない俺の責任だよな。
Kondo-san's voice barely hovered above a faint murmur, and his disheartened spirit eluded no one in the room. Then he suddenly straightened his posture and spoke up.
ここは俺が引き受けよう。俺が時間を稼いでるうちにできるだけ遠くへ逃げてくれ。
Hijikata-san's eyes shot open in bewilderment, and he was the first to react to Kondo-san's command.
父さん、あんた。
He gazed intently into Kondo-san's eyes, searching for any sign of what Kondo-san was planning. Instead of speaking, Kondo-san flashed a calm smirk to his old friend, a look I had never seen before. This seemed enough to satisfy Hijikata-san, who stared plaintively in response to Kondo-san's restrained gesture. Hijikata-san bit his lips in silence and looked at the floor. After a little while, he glanced up once more.
お前は雪村と大使たちを連れて先に合図を言っててくれ。この家の裏口からなら敵に見つからずに出られるはずだ。
However, Saito-san, who normally would have bowed curtly to Hijikata-san's order and followed it no later than after it was said, did not budge.
副長、お言葉ですが、お二人だけでこの場を切り抜けられるとは到底思えません。ここにいる全員で戦った方がまだ生き残る見込みはあるかと。俺はここに残ります。
俺も残ります。お二人を残して自分だけ逃げるわけにはいきません。お前ら
言ってくれるじゃねえか。俺と近藤さんだけじゃまともに敵と戦うことすらできねえってことか。
Hijikata-san's tone was light-hearted, but Saito-san's eyes were unwavering as he continued to stare at Hijikata-san. I think the way Hijikata-san was joking was a little bit strange to Saito-san, and his attitude was somewhat atypical to what we'd expect from the commander. Eventually, though, Hijikata-san's eyes glimmered with a kind light.
お前の言う通り、全員ここに残って戦うってのも生き残るための手では。俺たちが皆死んじまったら誰が新鮮についてくれるんだ。
In that instant, Hijikata-san's words seemed to have struck a nerve with Saito-san, whose eyes beamed widely in response.
このままここで犬死にしたら、俺たちは官軍に逆らった希代の悪党集団のままで終わっちまうぜ。元百姓やら浪人の寄せ集めで乱暴者で。 幕府や会津藩の命令のままに人を切ってた俺たちではあるが、そんな俺たちにだって生き残ってそれを伝えられんのはお前しかいねえんだ。
Hijikata-san was a foot away from Saito-san, making the delivery of his suggestion all the more intimate. Saito-san watched Hijikata-san's eyes with purpose, confirming to himself that all of his loyalty was not unfounded. After a moment of quiet deliberation, Saito-san stood tall.
わかりました。お二人にはまたお会いできると信じています。
Each word came slowly but confidently from Saito-san. To that, a wry grin emerged from Hijikata-san's lips.
ああ、すぐに追いつくから待っててくれ。
Within Hijikata-san's words, too, was a self-assured force. Those of us asked to evacuate were careful not to make too much noise as we opened the back door. Then we were met with a brilliant ray of light. Saito-san instinctively covered his face with his hand, and his brow furrowed in reaction to the blinding light. Are you okay, Saito-san?
問題ない。今は脱出が優先だ。
Saito-san tiptoed carefully through the shadows to evade detection, and he soundlessly led us to a corridor where we could exit. All of a sudden, Shimada stopped in his tracks as something caught his attention. What's the matter, Shimada?
いや、あそこにいるのはまさか。
Shimada's eyes shut open with fear as he gestured towards the front gate of the Nagaoka mansion. The person standing at the gate was none other than Sanan-san, who was engaging with soldiers adorned in their Western uniforms. However, the conversation was conspicuously relaxed. It didn't seem like he was threatened at all.
奴らが持っている銃は薩長軍が使っていたのと同じものだ。
Does that mean they're a part of the Imperial Army? But where would Sanan-san be with them?
ここからでは 何を話しているのか聞き取れ。もう少し近づくぞ。
Both Shimada and I nodded, and we sneaked carefully towards the front gate.
さあ、こちらです。銃を持った大使たちは教練に出かけていますから、今なら難なく新選組幹部の首を取ることができるはずです。
聞いたか？ほとんどの大使は出払ってしまっているそうだ。今のうちに幹部連中を捕まえろ。はい。
With their mark, all of the armed Imperial riflemen stormed the compounds. I could almost feel the blood drain from my body. What could all of this mean? For some reason, our sworn enemies were able to locate the Shinsengumi and plan a strike. And those men, they spoke with Sanan-san as if they were familiar allies in casual discussion.
局長が予想した通りだったが。
Then that must mean... Was Sanan-san really the one who leaked the information of our whereabouts to the enemy? Both Kondo-san and Hichikata-san were still inside the compounds. We're completely unaware of this. What should I tell Saito-san? We gotta go to Aizu. Let's head to Aizu. Saito-san, let's head to Aizu. Despite how badly I wanted to return inside the Nakaoka mansion and warn Kondo-san and Hichikata-san of what we'd uncovered, we cannot let Kondo-san or Hichikata-san's sacrifice to buy our time to escape go to waste. Saito-san timidly stared at the ground, burying his teeth into his lips, into his supple lip. But eventually...
合図に向かう。
It was as if he'd come to an important realization. Then, Saito-san turned to stare into my eyes.
あんたは俺の本分を思い出させてくれた。感謝する。
After offering his curt words of appreciation, Saito-san immediately turned around and began to march away.
大丈夫ですよ。あのお二人がそう簡単に死ぬはずがありません。すぐに我々に追いついてくださるに決まってます。先に行って待っていましょう。
And so the three of us made our way for Aizu. That day was likely the longest and most anxiety-inducing day I had ever experienced in my life. Time seemed to move at a glacier's pace, and whenever I found myself alone, it was impossible to keep myself from thinking about the worst-case scenario. I had to tell myself, everything will be fine. Kondo-san and Hijikata-san couldn't die. They will reunite with us soon. I repeated the sentiment until the words were burned in my mouth, and it helped to soothe my anxiety. We patiently awaited the return. After what felt like an eternity.
すまねえな。追いつくのが遅くなっちまって。
まさかこんな形でトンショを離れることになるとは思わなかったよな。
Hijikata-san, Heisuke. I felt warm tears slide down my cheeks. I was so glad to see them. Hijikata-san and Heisuke were both safe and sound.
お二人ともよくご無事で。
Shimada too seemed flushed with emotion, and he nodded repeatedly as he spoke in relief. But Heisuke, where have you been this whole time?
三男さんが昼間どこかへ出かけようとしてるのを見かけてさ、後をつけたんだけど見失っちまって、トンショに戻ろうとした時、土方さんを見かけたんだ。
Hijikata-san sighed.
まさか三男さんが近藤さんを売るとは思わなかったな。 あの人は薩長の安い策に乗せられるような人じゃなかったんだが。
My mind raced back to the scene back there. I felt troubled seeing someone whom we had regarded as a close friend succumb to menacing temptations. What hasn't changed is my ability to not be able to read. Going back to reality, I saw the gears turning in Hijikata-san's head as he ruminated aloud.
俺のせいだよな。あの人が血を飲むために辻斬りを繰り返してるってことに気づいてたのに何もしてやれなかった。
土方さんだけのせいじゃねえって。俺だって三男さんを止められなかったのは同じだよ。こうなっちまう前になんかできることがあったはずなのに。
I could have sworn that Heisuke's eyes were puffing up as he slumped his shoulders in defeat.
三男さん、どこで道を間違っちまったのかな。落ち水を飲んだきっかけは怪我で剣を握れなくなって。それでもまだ新選組のみんなの役に立ちてって思って。羅刹になる前はたとえ刀を握れなくても武士だったはずなのにな。
Grief filled the air around us with a thick tension. If we were able to stop Sun and Sun in the past, then maybe none of this would have happened. It felt as though all of us were cycling through our regrets in this moment, wallowing in our own shame. It was Saito-san of all people who was able to break the clouds of silence looming above our conversation.
副長、局長は一体どちら？
It was a question that none of us were willing to ask, presumably because the answer frightened us. Hijikata-san bit into his lip, choosing his words carefully before he said them, but it seemed that bringing the words to life was a difficult task for him. Hijikata-san let out a heavy sigh, and his voice quivered as he finally answered Saito-san's question.
近藤さんは敵に捕まっちまった。俺を逃がすためにな。
Hearing one piece of bad news after the other put all of us into stunned silence. Back with Kondo-san and the rest of the Shinsengumi were in Kyo, they'd spent most of their time rounding up men who'd identified as Imperial Nationalist warriors. Which, as expected, did not end well at all with the members of the Imperial Nationalist Party, who did their best to stifle our efforts. It was these men who had custody of Kondo-san now. What would become of him? Yawning. Imagining what torturous plans they had in store for him made my heart swell with pain. This feeling must have ached in Hijikata-san as well, and he turned to gaze at the serious formations above us.
殺されるって決まったわけじゃねえ。俺たちにできることはまだあるはずだ。黙って殺されるなんて性分じゃねえからな。往生際の悪さだけは自信があるんだ。俺にできることなら何でもやるつもりだぜ。
Hijikata-san lowered his gaze to look at Saito-san.
サイト、俺の代わりに大使連中を会津まで連れてってやってくれ。
ですが副長は。
土方さんのことなら心配すんなよ。俺がしっかり守るつもりだからさ。
Eisuke lifted his forearm to pound at his chest, and his voice beamed with pride. I was unsure if that would be enough to satisfy Saito-san's concern, but he responded in kind.
わかりました。では我々は一足先に会津へ向かうことにします。
ああ、信頼してるぜ、サイト。